new innovation is good for the economy. It means we could take the current goods and services we create and have spare labor. So automation is not a bad thing.
In 2006, Warren Buffett made the single biggest gift anyone has ever made. He pledged $30 billion to the Gates Foundation, started by Bill and Melinda Gates. In doing so, Buffett doubled the size of what was already the world's largest philanthropic organization, with efforts across the globe battling illness, fighting poverty, and boosting education. On the 10th anniversary of the gift, we talked to Bill Gates about how the foundation has used the money, what Bill's learned along the way, and how geopolitical trends affect his efforts. You were already operating at a scale that no philanthropy had operated at before. With Warren's gift, you are now operating at an even larger scale. What has changed at the foundation? How do you think about what you're doing? And what have you learned since that gift was made?
Well, it's amazing that Warren showed the trust to combine so that about half of what we have comes from Warren's gift, which is the biggest gift anyone's ever given. And of course, it all came about because his wife tragically died early. We always thought she would run his foundation and we'd run ours, and we might learn from each other, but they'd be two completely separate things. In terms of scale, our foundation, the first really big gift to it was the $20 billion I put in the year 2000. And so then we're scaling up and we're giving over $1 billion a year, because whatever you have, you give at least 5% of it away. And between 2000 and 2006, when Warren gave his gift, our capacity, understanding, okay, what could we do in agriculture? What could we do in malaria? Built up dramatically. The staff went from 5 people to about 600 people. Today, the foundation, because my investments and the value of Berkshire has done well, and there's so much need out there, we're giving about $5 billion a year. We have 1,600 people, tons of partnerships, and we're so much smarter about if you want to fund the creation of a new vaccine or work with the government on a primary healthcare system. Well, the goal that Melinda and I have, and shared by Warren, is that our main focus is going to be taking the poorest and getting rid of some key inequities, primarily health.
And it does sound like it was a shift in your thinking from at least the early years of your philanthropy, where you were more focused on the idea of getting this technology to people, directly into people's homes, and that will help make a difference, to now, what is the tech-enabled component that helps us deliver things that might have been around for a long time, like a particular vaccine?
We thought the delivery systems, which for health is the primary healthcare system, we thought that was good enough that just doing new tools alone would bring us the impact. And it would have brought some impact, but nowhere nearly what we've been able to achieve. And part of the reason I love the work at the foundation is in terms of learning new things. It's every bit as dynamic as Microsoft was, where if you didn't change, you wouldn't stay out in front. And here we have that same incredible set of people who are dedicated to the mission and who are quite analytic in terms of saying, hey, are we getting the deaths down? Are we getting malnutrition down? Is it a supply problem? Is it a demand problem? The self-help groups are been amazing, because they are willing to speak up about when the primary health care is not being done right. And so we not only use it to educate the women on go seek the vaccine care and things like that. No individual woman would be able to say, come on, the nurses aren't showing up, the supplies aren't there. But as a group, we can ask them and use that to drive the system to work for them.
This year and last year, you make a big deal out of optimism. And you've done this in the past. You're a very optimistic person, even in the face of taking on massive life and death challenges. How do you retain your optimism at a time when geopolitically a lot of decisions are being made that seem to cut against what would help you achieve your goals. You look at borders being closed, a real skepticism over facts and experts, pushback against vaccines and contraception. Every one of those, at least in the developed world, would seem to be challenges to the Gates Foundation and challenges to your optimism. How do you deal with that?
Well, I feel certain that things will continue to improve. It won't necessarily be a purely linear path. For example, we are quite concerned right now that in the U.S., being willing to take the less than 1% of the budget that goes towards foreign aid, it's a total of $30 billion, $10 billion of which is just health. Buying HIV medicines is a huge thing, and the world's very dependent on the U.S. generosity there. Making sure that gets preserved despite all these changes, we'll have to fight for that, to make sure that happens. And it'd be a huge setback if it didn't. So I'm not saying that everything will improve every year, but the broad picture is that innovation every year does bring us new tools.
Is there a role for the foundation in making sure that people know what's going on, how this works?
Yes, we've been doing that for quite some time. We have to do even better. And although this annual letter, it's framed very appropriately as letting Warren know, the overall great things that have come out of his generosity, we want to get that to a very broad audience about our causes in general. We're not asking them, to give to us or anything, but as voters, people who have priorities, only if we can get millions of people to see this, then as push comes to shove, maybe the work on HIV and malaria and helping women with their health, maybe those things will be maintained.
You've always talked to both sides of the aisle, try to get them to understand support for vaccines, the global vaccine initiative. What's the mood like when you go in now? Are you doubling your efforts? You tripling your efforts? You scaling back your efforts? How does it work?
Well, we partner with the government because the U.S. government, our foundation, are the biggest funders of research in these areas. And for HIV, we're the biggest non-government funder of even the delivery stuff there. So, like on polio, the person who's run the CDC, Tom Frieden, he's leaving now, but he's been an absolutely amazing partner. So yes, we're very engaged with the U.S. government. The new administration's just coming into place. I had a meeting with President Trump to talk about some of the great achievements that the U.S. has been key to. And now that the cabinet's coming into place over the next month, I'll get to meet Rex Tillerson, who I knew in his previous role as CEO of ExxonMobil. I'll get to meet James Mattis, who's the defense secretary, and understand what their goals are, make sure they understand the partnerships we've had and the impact.
Is this something you take on yourself? Is that Bill Gates comes to D.C. and sits down with these people, or do you send your staff?
Sure.
How does it work?
Well, we have a team in D.C. It's a very good team, and working with the legislative staff in the key senator's office or the key congressman's office, that's happening every day because there's a lot of issues here. And I've been back in D.C. 3 or 4 times a year as part of the communication. And the Bush administration, 2000, 2008, is actually where the big increases took place. The budget was a little more free, and President Bush saw what was going on with HIV and malaria and got the funding up quite substantially. And then that was maintained under the Obama administration. And now we don't know yet, but the framework of, is it a win-win? Is it a good deal? Is keeping Africa stable? Is avoiding epidemics coming out of Africa? Is getting Africa to grow economically as a market opportunity for the U.S.? Is the U.S. being strong in Africa, say, versus all the things China's doing there? I do think even in this new framework, this work deserves a priority, but there'll be a lot of dialogue before that gets figured out.
We hear a lot about people talking about the future of work in developed countries, how this is going to affect the U.S. But you spend a lot of your time outside the U.S. You spend time in developing countries. Will automation change those economies in a way that we're not thinking about?
The opportunity that China had to become the workshop of the world for lots of different things, including textiles and electronics, is less there today. Now, Chinese wages have gone up a lot. That's great. Their economy is shifting more to services. And so you see countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, even Ethiopia to some degree, coming in and educating their workforce enough that they're capable of doing those factory-type jobs. But in aggregate, manufacturing jobs won't go up the way that they used to. And that's great. It means all the goods and services will be cheaper and more available. But it means that economies will shift to a services focus earlier at a lower GDP level than they did in the past. But that's all good. It's because we know how to make this stuff using less resources. So it's a problem of excess, not a shortage.
They say that you should never work with your friends. You and Warren were friends for a long time. Once the gift was given, he joined the foundation. What's it like working with Warren? How do you guys work? And has it changed your relationship at all?
No, I wouldn't say that I work with Warren, because for a lot of the things, including companies inside Berkshire, he gives the leaders total freedom. And so although I talk on the phone with Warren about the world and politics, economics, different businesses, we're only coming together a few times a year where it's really a review of what the foundation's up to. He's showing a lot of trust. In terms of a friend I work with, Melinda and I, together with the CEO, Sue Desmond-Hellman, we're in there every day working together and deciding who could do what. So, my key partners through my career, Paul Allen was a close friend. He was my partner creating the early Microsoft. Steve Ballmer was my partner creating the non-early Microsoft. And now, on truly an equal basis for the first time, I have Melinda's my partner. And that's working very, very well. But Warren, he's super engaged in his business. Anytime we want his help or advice, he's there. Melinda and he and I are the three trustees, but it's his classic hands-off approach.